What's up guys, and in today's video I'm going to be going through how I am leveraging the power of vision and how this works in my daily life, basically the power of vision and purpose and why I think this is important. So the mission with these videos is basically to show our builds raw and real, what it is that we're actively doing, what we're implementing, to show the good, the bad, the ugly, and also just so that we can build better mental models into the future and scale those mental models to just build better and better products to solve really big problems within businesses and organizations, and also just to call in visionaries, people basically that are aligned with the mission and the vision that we have ultimately for the future, and also just to network with cool people doing cool things so that we're ultimately just on the same wavelength and just are also building cool things as well. So as always, I've broken these down into 5 simple steps. So how vision and purpose fuel my vision per se. So these are what basically makes me and encompass me, and these are things that I take on a daily basis and also just actively implement. But yeah, enough yapping, and let's just get straight into it. So number one is vision is your North Star, and why this is super important for me is without a clear vision you're drifting. Vision keeps me locked in on the prize, which is ultimately saying that we want to make sure that Killer Chaos OS, our internal OS system that we have, ultimately fuels the vision for solving chaos, and ultimately saying, hey, we have the vision for what it is that we want to achieve, or that I want to achieve, the overarching goal, and ultimately just making that vision as clear as possible to say, hey, what are the questions I could also be asking to make sure that clarity is formed in order to get to that vision, and saying, hey, I wrote down my 2030 goal, which is Killer Chaos OS reshapes industries, to say, hey, like, I want to make sure that we are building value and we want to reshape industries. We just don't want to go for just solving problems and just providing a service. We genuinely want to reshape industries and change the landscape of what we think is possible today, and ultimately just create something new that we know that we can ultimately achieve. And saying, hey, Killer Chaos OS hits $100 million, inspires millions, to say, hey, it's not just about the numbers, it's about the impact that we'll have. To say, hey, let's set this massive goal that we're ultimately building towards, and say we don't need to have proof of anything right now, in the sense that saying, hey, we need to have these tangibles in order to go for it, but to ultimately say that we need to go for it right now, and everything else around it will just form. So basically just taking action and just saying, hey, we're gonna build Killer Chaos OS, but let's start with something. Let's just build something. Otherwise, it's a pipeline dream that ultimately has no value if we're not actively building it. And also just to inspire millions, which I think is super important. Like, in as much as you can make all this money and build all these cool things, I think one most important thing is just to inspire millions of people to ultimately say, hey, we need to make sure that what it is that we're building ultimately just inspires the next generation. Because ultimately, my vision and the way that I also like to think about things is that we're leaving the platforms like in the past, where the past generations left platforms for us to build on. And I like to take the same approach to say, hey, what it is that we're building today is ultimately going to inspire the next generation. And if we're going to inspire the next generation, we just need to go for it. No matter how difficult we think it is, we ultimately just need to go for it and fully just understand that what it is that we're doing, we ultimately have the vision to inspire millions and millions of people. And that is a goal that we can never quantify to say, hey, it's worth $100 million or anything like that. It's ultimately just saying we want to reshape the landscape and ultimately just inspire millions of people to do the same thing, and also just to create value, which also adds accountability on our part, or my part per se, to say, hey, I need to make sure that I'm doing the right actionables every single day, that I'm taking action within myself to make sure that I'm building not only for myself or my team, but also for the future, the millions of people that we want to inspire, or that I want to inspire, particularly, to say, hey, we need to make sure that this is a overarching goal that we ultimately have, is just to inspire millions of people. And how we get there is simply just by action and just building Killer Chaos OS, because we don't know how it's going to turn out into the near future. We wish we had a crystal ball that could say, hey, Killer Chaos OS is going to do XYZ, but I think having that vision that is crystal clear in saying, hey, we have this 2030 vision goal that we have, that we need to make sure that Killer Chaos OS reshapes industries and inspires millions of people We ultimately are striving for this every single day because we know what the goal is. And saying, hey, I pinned it where I see it daily to say, hey, in as much as you can have this vision, seeing it each and every single day, make sure that that fire is burning within you to say, hey, you need to make sure that this fuel that we're actively adding fuel to the fire by seeing it every single day, because that just brings the level of intensity that we need to make sure that this goal does happen. And saying, hey, we need to just make sure that we're seeing this every single day, or me particularly, to make sure that the team, I'm able to translate those actionables to the team to say, hey, we have this vision, and making sure that not only I see it every single day, but making sure that the team also knows it every single day, that hey, this is what we're striving for. Because ultimately having that vision and also having it where you can see it gets you through the tough times, and that is a concept unmatched that I've personally just been implementing to say, in as much as we have this vision, by not seeing it every single day, subconsciously it doesn't burn the fuel, that it doesn't burn the fire in the way that we need it to. So let's see it each and every single day, and ultimately just build towards that. And saying, hey, the biggest lesson that I've learned here is vision's your compass, let it guide every single move. To say, hey, our vision is ultimately what's going to guide the plays that we're going to make, because we're ultimately then just going to ask the questions of, is this aligned with our vision and our goals? Is it aligned with what it is that we actively want to build? Is it creating value in the manner that it will allow us to have a stepping stone that ultimately allows us to achieve the overarching goal, or just builds the momentum in order for us to achieve that overarching goal and just allows us to keep pushing the needle forward? And understanding that is super important, to making sure that our vision, or my vision particularly, is the compass that's gonna ultimately guide us in what it is that we're actively building on a day-to-day basis. And saying, hey, the first principles question that I like to ask here is, what's the core vision that pulls you forward when stuff gets hard? To basically say, hey, when things get hard, we ultimately need to make sure that our vision ultimately guides us through that, and ultimately says, hey, we have this overarching vision, and if we stop, we're ultimately letting ourselves down, and not only us, but the millions of people that we could possibly be impacting one day. And that is far greater to lose, for me particularly, than anything else. And ultimately just creating that vision where we're able to inspire the next generation is ultimately where I want to take this, and ultimately just want to also inspire the team to say, hey, we're not only just doing this for our short term, but we're also doing this long term for what it is that we're actively doing, and also inspiring millions and millions of other people. Which ultimately leads to the second point, which is purpose gives pain meaning. Ultimately saying, pain's inevitable. You're ultimately just gonna face pain no matter what it is that you're actively building, because if it's worth building, it is gonna be painful. Each and every single day is not gonna be easy. It's gonna be tough, and it's gonna require a different level of growth from you and the team as well. And just solely understanding this allows me to turn purpose into fuel, to say, hey, we need to make sure that our purpose is burning, the fire in our purpose is burning in as much intensity as possible, if that even makes sense. But yeah, it is burning as much intense as possible, so that we're just building that level of intensity that ultimately just allows us to turn our purpose into fuel, so that when we do face pain, we ultimately understand that the pain that we're facing is temporary, and this pain is only going to drive us forward and push a new level of growth that is ultimately just going to allow us to push the needle forward, and ultimately build this big picture vision that we ultimately have for me, and also for the team as well. And saying, hey, we're grinding 16 hours days, we're sick, but my purpose, proving what's possible, keeps me going. And ultimately saying, even though we face these things that we face on a daily basis, just being able to just use this as purpose, or as fuel for the purpose, we're ultimately able to just push the needle forward. I've been sick a couple days while filming this, funny enough. I don't know if anyone could tell, but ultimately just saying, hey, consistency no matter what. Even if I'm sick, I'm still going to show up each and every single day, and I'm still just going to take action no matter how painful it is, because during that pain, you ultimately face a new level of growth. If I stopped when I was feeling sick, ultimately that was gonna make me regret even taking a day off and making me feel bad about taking a day off. But I know sometimes you need to, but ultimately I just couldn't do that because I know what the vision is and what it is that we want to achieve, and by stopping, that is not an option. It's either we do it or there is no other option. We do it and there is no other option. And hearing no, so every no in a pitch fuels is fuel to sharpen my game. So basically to say each time we hear a no, it's ultimately just feedback that we can use to build better feedback loops and ultimately just sharpen our game in what it is that we're actively building, not only for me but for the team as well, to making sure that hey, we hear no's so many times, but ultimately just using these no's to understand what it is that we're doing. Even dislikes from videos, to ultimately say hey, we may get dislikes from videos, what could we change up, what feedback can we learn from that, and ultimately just having this. Because when I was still starting out in the game like a long time ago, when I heard had my first business, essentially the thing that happened was that I was facing a lot of rejection at the time, but it never phased me. But the older I got, then it started phasing me. So clearly there was the disconnect. But ultimately just tapping back into that to saying hey, no's are basically feedback loops that allow us to iterate better and move better into the future and ultimately build better products and services, is ultimately what's going to push the needle forward for us and also for me as well, to also just translate that down into the team as well. And the big picture vision that I have, or the lesson that I have learned from this, is purpose makes the grind worth it. Lean into it, saying hey, if we don't have purpose, what is the overarching goal, or what are we actually using as fuel to drive what it is that we're doing? What is our why for doing this? Like I said in the beginning, this is to inspire millions of people, to hit $100 million worth of impact, and also just to reshape industries. And ultimately just having that why allows us to just move and build everything else around that, because it ultimately allows us to understand that we're building for this and this is how we're going to get there. We may not have all the answers figured out. I mean, sure, we may not, but we're ultimately just going to figure it out, and that's the most important thing, so that we're actively just asking the questions that allow us to bring clarity in what it is that we're actively building, and saying hey, what's the core why that makes my pain worth it? Is it purpose? Is it what it is it monetary sense, or what is your purpose, what is your why? Which for many people it's super different, but for us it's ultimately just inspiring millions of people, having $100 million worth of impact. Is not the number per se, but just having that level of impact as well in the long term is ultimately the reason why we feel Killer Chaos OS, our internal operating system that allows us to build better systems and also just to reshape internal infrastructures for businesses, and also just allows us to also move into the third point, which is attracting the right people. And I think this is super important, especially when you're just starting out, just aligning yourself with the right people, even if it's in school. Because for me, it was a very big lever, it was a big leverage point for me as well, just understanding what it is that I need to do in terms of attracting the right people as well. Also with these videos, just making them a point to make sure that we're networking with cool people, building cool things at the same time. And why this is key is your vision's a magnet. It pulls in the right clients, collabs, and crews, to say not only just people that you can network with, but it also pulls in clients, people that you can collaborate with into the future, and also help each other out by building, whether it's building products or just networking with people and just having conversations that even if you pick up a nugget, they ultimately just move the needle for you and your business. Just understanding that just is unmatched for me, in my opinion. And how I'm actively doing this is saying, hey, shared my $100 million vision, impact vision within these videos, and saying hey, landed a $4 million sales beast as a guest. So we're actively working on that, but I can't get into too much in that. So yeah, just actively just building a sales engine by basically saying we want to make sure that we're networking with cool people, building cool things, and just actively attracting the right people that ultimately just allow us to move the needle forward, and just ultimately just allows us to say hey, we are where we're at, but ultimately just by being able to leverage knowing the people that we are gonna know and also attracting them, ultimately just allows us to reach a new level of awareness, and also just allows us to build better with other people around us. Because in as much as you can do things, you can't do things alone, and that is something that you can fight as much as you want, but ultimately you can't build alone. And having and understanding this principle, just saying, hey, you need to build with other people and you need to collaborate, ultimately just allows you to go out there more, connect with people, speak to people, because you ultimately don't know who's going to bring value into your life, or and who you're going to bring value into their lives. And saying, hey, pitch planners with what we do, not even just planners, but ultimately just pitching other business owners to say, hey, we ultimately solve XYZ, and we're not trying to be salesy, but we want to make sure that what it is that we're offering actually creates value and actually solves problems. Because the number one thing that we always strive for, or at least I always strive for, is to make sure that the number one thing that we're doing is solving problems and figuring out how to better solve them, and also using feedback as a mode to basically understand what it is that we're actively doing, so that we can build better and scale better, and building mental models as well on top of that. But yeah, and saying, hey, vision's your vibe, share it out loud. So basically holding us accountable to say, hey, we're taking a leap of faith, or I'm taking a leap of faith by putting these videos out there and saying, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm building, and this is what I want to do. And ultimately just holding myself accountable, because now it's public domain, so people know what it is that we're actively striving for. And I need to make sure that each and every single day we're attacking, and just making sure that we're actively building the future in the way that we want to build the future, and are actively building the future. And saying, hey, what is the first principles question that we can ask here, which is, who's the one person in your vision that could pull in to change everything? To basically just ask, who can you have within your circle that allows you to 10x what it is that you're actively doing on a day-to-day basis, and who are the right people that you can have within your team as well, that will ultimately just be there through the tough times, and ultimately just help you push the business forward. Because you build the people, and the people build the business. And saying, hey, this pulls into the fourth point, which is purpose drives innovation. And I think this is so important as well. Just saying, hey, purpose pushes you to build stuff no one else can see, to ultimately say that if we have purpose, we're ultimately driving innovation, and ultimately allowing us to just push the needle forward, and ultimately just understand what it is that we need to be doing on a day-to-day basis, and just pushing the needle forward in terms of innovation. Like I like to say, and I'm sure I've said this in a couple of videos, innovation is the key. Iteration is the key to innovation, which is my favorite saying to say. As much as we iterate, we're also pushing the needle into how much we can innovate. And saying, hey, we built a predictive analysis chaos shield because my purpose is to kill chaos, not to fix it, to basically predict it and then fix it, rather than taking the reactive approach of, oh, it's happened, now what are we going to do? And just actively just building towards that, and saying, hey, stack back end and martech skills to solve planners' pains in ways others can't. So basically skill stacking, stacking different levels of skills, because we can say that, hey, I want to be the number one in backend systems, but I don't understand marketing tech. I don't understand how to sell what it is that we're doing, or how to leverage how it is that we're doing for scale. And I can say, hey, I live in this bubble where I ultimately just understand backend systems, and that's all I understand, backend systems. But I don't take the approach to learn new things in terms of marketing tech, because now with this we can use different levers that allow us to build these, and also help our clients sell them for other different purposes. And ultimately saying, hey, purpose sparks creativity, build it to build better, to say, hey, we need to use it in order to build better, by stacking different levels of skills, and ultimately just scaling that into the future, to say, hey, we need to make sure that what it is that we're doing ultimately just drives innovation, and also just allows us to push the needle forward of what we think is possible. Because what we think is possible today might be 10 times less than what it is actually possible into the future. So just ultimately just taking that initiative of saying, hey, we can ultimately just build better, and we just need to take that approach of asking the questions of how can we build better, and ultimately just understanding that purpose ultimately drives innovation. And then asking the first principles question of asking, which is, what's the core innovation your purpose is pushing you to create? For me, it's solving chaos and just building cool stuff with cool people as well, and ultimately just having this impact on millions and millions of people that we see to have on what it is that we're building, just helping people just build better and have streamlined processes within their internal infrastructure, which is something that I am super deep into, and just ultimately just using that to say, hey, we have the skill, now let's stack XYZ skill on top of that, and ultimately just scale that for our clients that we're actively working with, and also just use this as a mode to build better mental models into the future, so that we can understand different marketing terms, and also how to sell our product, which is super important, and also just how to push different levers in terms of marketing, and also just build the best possible platform and service that we can possibly build for our clients, and also for the modes or the future progress or things that we're going to be working on into the future. And saying, hey, this now ties everything up, which is the fifth point. And this fifth point is super important. It's vision builds legacy. And why this is important is legacy is not about cash. It never truly is. Like, what is the impact? I mean, I think for me personally, it's not about the money, the monetary sense for it. It's more so about the impact. And I've mentioned this a couple times in this video to say that, hey, the impact is going to be 10 times worth more than the money itself, because ultimately just having that level of impact that brings the next generation of backend system builders, or even just inspires new generations of people just building things for the future, ultimately makes it real, and ultimately allows me personally to feel inspired to wake up every single day and tackle the problems that we are facing on a day-to-day basis, because we ultimately know that what it is that we're building fuels the vision, and the impact that we're gonna have ultimately is worth every single bad thing that happens along the journey, because the journey is the most important thing. But while I'm still on the path of the journey, let's just build cool things and just focus on creating impact and solving problems at the same time, and also just networking with people that we can network with, and also just build together, build better systems, build better products together, and ultimately just scaling that up into the future. And saying, hey, every video, every system, every deal is a brick to my $100 million legacy, to say, hey, we want to build this up until here, and this is the overarching goal. And if we hit it, what is next? We're just gonna use different plays for that, so different stages for different phases for different stages, to say, hey, we are at this specific stage, but we know what the vision is, or at least I know what I want my vision to be, and ultimately just building for that each and every single day allows us to understand, or allows me to understand that, hey, we need to make sure that the impact that we're driving today builds the momentum to build that overarching goal. And I've mentioned this a couple of times, and just saying, hey, inspiring other African kids to dream big is my ultimate win, to say, hey, we want to just inspire kids that don't know much about what it is that we're doing, but we ultimately just want to leave an impact that allows us to basically change their landscape of what they think is possible, and ultimately just allows us to then basically say, hey, we need to just be impact driven, to just say, hey, whatever it is that we're doing, we're using the overarching goal, we're using the vision, we're using the purpose, and we're also just making sure that everything is aligned with that, to ultimately just inspire millions and millions of people. And saying, hey, the biggest lesson that I've learned here is legacy is your long-term game. Let's build it daily. So for me, it's just daily plays that we use every single day, to say, hey, we need to make sure that we have a long-term view on this and not just short-term, because ultimately you see a lot of things in terms of reputation loss. We can build in the short term but lose our reputation, which is something that I don't want to do, to make sure that we're building right and we're being authentic in our journey and what it is that we're actively building. By doing this, just showing our builds raw and real, like I always mention, and saying, hey, this is a long-term game. We're not just building for today, we're not building for yesterday, we're building for tomorrow and the next 5-10 years and even beyond that, and ultimately just allowing us to build today and scaling it into the future. And saying, hey, what's the first principles question that ties every single thing that we've spoken about, or this point together, which is, what's the core legacy you want to leave behind? And I think this is a very important one to ask, especially if you're building what it is that we're building. For me, I think this is a question I like to ponder about, and also just ask, hey, what is the purpose of life? But my question or the way I like to think about it, maybe it's the wrong question to ask. What if the question, instead of asking what is the meaning of life, by asking what's the core legacy you want to leave behind, and what do you want to define your life to be about, and what it is that you're actively just building each and every single day that allows you to just enjoy this moment on this pale blue dot, ultimately just allows you to understand and take gratitude in what it is that we're actively building, and just solely just understand that what it is that we're doing, these are the reasons why we're doing it, and these are the reasons why we're pushing so hard, because this is the ultimate goal that we're striving for, and we're going to do whatever it takes to get there, and we're going to win no matter what. And just solely just understanding this with vision and purpose and clarity, I know that into the future we're just going to build better systems, and we're going to build better infrastructure, and we're ultimately just going to reach that goal. I'm super excited. I'm super excited to share these videos. It's been 28 days. 28 days, and it's just feels like we're just getting started. And I'm super excited to do a lot more. This is so much fun. Like I started this like 28 days ago, and I didn't think it would be this fun, but it is, and I will continue to share a lot more of what it is that we're actively doing, the way that I like to think about things, the way I like to frame things, and also just to show you our mental models, or my mental models of how I think about things, how I'm actively trying new things, failing new things, and also just actively just implementing new strategies. And yeah, these 28 days have been super fun. So I'm super excited to share more, and I just wanted to share this one because this is a very special thought process, or things that I like to think about for me in terms of the power of vision and purpose, because I think this is just ultimately just going to be the bedrock or the foundation that is going to allow us to build what it is that we're actively building on a day-to-day basis, in terms of mental models, in terms of the systems that we're building, the infrastructure. Everything that we're going to be building is just going to be based off of the power of vision and purpose, and I know that each and every single day we're building towards that, and just by taking these daily actions and being consistent, I know for a fact we're going to get there. It's not just a question of saying, hey, we need to have a extended time horizon in what it is that in the time frame that we are going to get there, and ultimately saying, hey, we're going to get there, but we need to make sure that we're taking the daily consistent actionable steps in order to get there. And I'm super excited, like I said, and I'm just so excited. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to connect with me on X, LinkedIn, Instagram, and make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on day 29.